ADHD Babes, the podcast. A podcast hosted by the ADHD Babes community for the community. Join us every 2 weeks to share in our babes' personal experiences, gain useful tools, and be educated by special guests in topics such as ADHD management, relationships, general well-being, tech and fun, culture, and more. Please note, nothing mentioned during the podcast is meant as a diagnosis. If you believe you have ADHD, please seek professional advice and visit or join ADHDBabes.com for help with diagnosis. No clinical diagnosis is required to join. And now, you're listening to the next episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast. Thank you to all our listeners so far for joining us. Today's episode is hosted by me, Jules, and
me, Abigail. And in this episode today, we're going to be discussing the intersections between ADHD symptoms and perceived blackness.
Joining in on the conversation, we are joined by our ADHD babes, Selom. I feel like I've said that wrong. I do apologize. And Tyler, welcome.
Hi.
Hello. Thanks so much for being with us today. So we do know that there are traits and stereotypes which are commonly associated with the Black race, but some of these are actually, in fact, symptoms of ADHD. So things that we would have heard of, such as Black people are so loud or Black people are too much. Both of these are symptoms which actually appear on the ADHD diagnosis criteria. So be really keen to hear the type of experiences that both of you have had with this.
I'm trying to think how long I've been trying to get diagnosed for. Probably maybe around 15 years, I guess.
Wow.
So the first time I went I just went to my GP and he just fobbed me off loads of teenagers get told they're too talkative in school or they don't focus or blah, 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 that kind of stuff. And all through school, it was the same, all reports would be better if she didn't talk as much, those kinds of things, lack of focus, she's bright and intelligent, blah, 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 blah. And then I guess I went to high school that was a fairly diverse school, but I guess in terms of the many schools where I'm from in Manchester, there is a higher percentage of Black students and stuff, so it was kind of just swept under the rug, there's no problem here because you're in top set for everything, which is fine, yeah, cool, but I would have done a lot better had it been picked up on earlier. But because it's kind of part of your personality and you're just like all the other Black kids, I guess, you're just smarter, it doesn't necessarily mean oh, it's going to get picked up on. In fact, it makes it harder for them to pick up on anything, which was a massive issue. And then obviously going through education, getting to university and stuff like that, it kind of makes it more difficult to get help. So then it was every time I'd ask someone for help, it just oh, but that's just how you are. And then it's kind of just right, well, it's not, because I'm obviously struggling to do things and make what's the word? So because my personality is quite loud, it can be quite abrasive sometimes. I've got a short fuse for certain things, not everything, but it ticks a lot of the boxes where it's is this your personality? Is this just a stereotype of who you are as a Black person, or is this actually ADHD? And it wasn't until when was it? Last year in lockdown, I just sent, obviously because you weren't allowed to go to GPs and stuff. So I did it online and I literally just wrote a massive thing, these are all the things that I've got, blah, blah, blah. Obviously they've not seen me, so they can't just fob me off here. It was a new GP. She was just yeah, it sounds like ADHD to me. I can get you a referral done straight away. But it took me not being in the room for someone to actually take me seriously. It's maybe this could be a thing. And then I had the diagnosis stuff earlier on this year. And they were like, yeah. And I was like, all right, okay. Well, that's great. But it's taken me 15 years. And it's kind of just like, if I was from any other racial background, would that have happened quicker? Or is it just a case of like, oh, you're just slotting into exactly where we think you would be as a Black woman or whatever? Like, it's just a bit annoying, but whatever. It's happened now. So I've got the badge.
Wow. And over those like 15 years, did you have like the language or any idea that you thought it was ADHD, or you just thought that there was something?
I'm very like on researching. So I'd just like be like, oh, I seem to keep getting the whole like you're talkative, lack of focus. I'm really easily distracted. So I just like type in those like buzzwords. I get told I'm too loud, or like we'll be having a conversation. Everyone's like, why are you shouting? I'm like, I don't even realize that I'm shouting, or I'll forget stuff. And it's just like, obviously not all of those are down to like being Black or whatever, but a lot of them are. So then it's kind of just like, so researching those things, and then it came up like, oh, ADHD. So I was like, all right, okay, I'll look into that further and see how many things not pop up, but like I can relate to, pretty much the whole list. So it was a bit like, it's definitely not me as a person or like who I am racially. It's just how my brain works, which I can't do anything about. So yeah, I researched it and then thought, okay, I find those similarities between myself and like this neurodivergency. It's like you tell someone and then automatically they'd be like, but have you been diagnosed with that, or are you just saying it because you think it's a get out clause? No, I'm literally like, I spend so many hours hyper focusing on this thing.
Exactly.
If it wasn't me, I wouldn't even be jumping on it. Like, I just wouldn't. And how many neurotypical people go out in search of researching something, find so many similarities, and be like, oh yeah, you know, this is sounds similar to me. You just wouldn't, because you wouldn't even be thinking about it. It wouldn't resonate with you in any way. So it's kind of like a bit annoying. Whereas I feel like when some of my like white friends, especially in high school and stuff, are like, oh, I'm dyslexic, I didn't turn around to them and say, oh, are you sure? Just cool. You keep it moving in it, like it's just how it is. But if you as a Black person say something to a white person, they then want you to justify it, like, or like prove to them that you actually are. And then if you say it to a Black person, it's like, oh, why do you want to be like that? Like, it's a problem. So you can't win either way. So yeah, there's just I don't know, I think in the Black community especially, there's like this whole like ableism kind of aspect to it, where, you know, we've had to struggle, so you just deal with it. You don't need a name for it, just deal with it, move on, because everybody else has their own issues, just move on, blah, blah, blah. But actually, if you have the right accommodations, it can be so much easier for you to be like high flying and stuff like that. But you just have to accept it and then move on. But it takes acceptance to get anywhere. So yeah.
I definitely agree with that. There's a lot of ableism in the Black community, and I think also the work twice as hard narrative that I think is like really fed into like often our communities. So it can feel like we just feel like, well, I must not be working hard enough. I'm not trying hard enough. That's all it is. I'm being lazy. It's like you wouldn't even consider. I never considered, because similar to you, I was always told that, oh, you are really clever. You know, you just need to push yourself harder. She's always just not reaching her full potential. Maybe it's because she's too talkative. She's always asking questions in class. There's always that other like look into it. And when I was researching about like Black looking especially a bit more into Black girls in school, I saw how I think the report was by gender about how Black girls are twice as likely to be expelled from school, and it did kind of come up about how there can be sometimes learning difficulties, but they're just seen as like being a threat or being disruptive and non-compliant. It's never considered that they need more support. It's just like, oh, this child is choosing to be disruptive, so that's how I think often our needs can be ignored. And then on the flip side, with our families, I think because of that stigmatization, sometimes even if they do suspect something, there might be a fear of, I don't want my child to be stigmatized, deemed as being like loud or disruptive. So then sometimes there's like unintentionally not getting that further help for the child, or on the flip side, the school not realizing that child needs further help. So yeah, that's really interesting.
And that's just following off of that. And that's also interesting as well, because I had the similar experience. And funny enough, I was able to get access to my medical records from when I was a child. Do not ask why and how, but I managed to get a hold of it. And I know there was a particular in primary school. So I also had similar sort of kind of reports back from classes and teachers that, you know, when she's focused, she's great, but then she will just react and it disrupts the whole class. We don't know when she's gonna, literally, we don't know when Jules is gonna just like fall off the rails or whatever. And I always used to get that sort of language. And I remember specifically I think it was a teaching assistant that sort of identified certain things and knew that there must be a learning difficulty, and approached my parents, and my parents refused for further tests because to them it was, no, my child is fine. She doesn't have this. And again,
Don't
being
stigmatize
that
my
my
child with
parents were
anything. Yeah.
exactly, and being that my parents were also Christians and very religious, it was just like, I don't pray that sort of stuff for my child's life. So it also made me think like now. So I only recently got a diagnosis in the lockdown, and it also kind of like pieced a lot of things together for me. And looking back on that report, because I only just came across it earlier this year, kind of thinking, imagine if my parents hadn't, you know, refused the sort of help and had said, okay, let's get Juliana tested. Um, where would that have put me? And, you know, the sort of support I would have received. At my tender age of like 33 now, I'm just like, oh, I'm just having to learn all of this stuff and try and understand myself and, you know, do a lot of unlearning and undoing, and also not blaming myself for a lot of things, because I used to be so frustrated at the fact that I wasn't understanding, or I was really kind of like, if I wasn't getting something, I would immediately be like, oh, I can't do it, because it was just kind of like it wasn't hitting. And I would be so angry with myself, or when I felt like I was trying my hardest and it was genuinely trying my hardest, and then to be told it was good, but I feel like you can try harder, you immediately kind of feel like discouraged, because you're just like, that was my hardest.
Yeah. You don't know how long it's been. I
Yeah.
gave you everything.
I gave you everything. What else do you want from me? You know, this
Yeah.
sort of kind of thing. So it just, you know, and again, it was like growing up at home, it's similar. It was, if my parents were like, oh, do this or do that, or have you done this? And I'm like, I forgot. How are you forgetting? And it's just kind of like, I don't know. It's just my brain. I can't, I there's no words to it, but they didn't quite understand that. So yeah, so I feel like we all kind of share the same sort of experience, and it's I guess it's refreshing to know that it's not something. Well, when I found out my diagnosis, I was like, oh, it makes sense. It just all makes sense. And even sort of like my siblings, they were the one that that also sort of helped kind of because when it came to my diagnosis, they had to find I had to find a family member or somebody who knew me well to kind of like fill out sort of like my childhood and stuff. And my sister was like, yeah, I know you had ADHD. I was like, girl, so
Telling me now.
you're telling me now? And she does a lot of that anyway, to be honest. She's always just like, yeah, I knew that kind of. And even kind of when I look at like my mum, I also feel like my mum has ADHD. And I don't know if there's a sort of link to ADHD being hereditary. I know there has been conversations, but I wouldn't exactly know how that comes about. But a lot of the sort of like symptoms I see them in my mum so much. And to even try and say, Mum, so have you considered getting tested? I it's a scary conversation. It's not really a scary conversation, but I know the words I'm going to be met with, you know. So yeah, so I don't know, I went on a tangent there, but
No, I couldn't agree more. I definitely similarly see that in my dad as well. So many of the same things that make me think, yeah, this is definitely hereditary. This is where it's all come from. It's from you.
Exactly. But they think it's an insult, and they think they've afflicted you. So for you to even like insinuate that the hardships that you may have had, not necessarily from the ADHD itself, but from the fact that it was so late diagnosed, like to even insinuate that, they're like, not today, and the conversation just gets shut down immediately.
Yeah, definitely had that with my mom, where you did well, you've done well, like what's the problem? It's like, yeah, but yeah, I totally hear you. But what about, be interested to hear some of your experiences as well, Salem, in terms of like your diagnosis and experiences, and as a Black person, kind of the two going together.
Yeah, I mean, like in my school experience, I kind of just tried to be as out of the radar from my teachers as I could possibly do it. Like I had quite a busy childhood, I guess you could say. Like I moved, my parents split up when I was like 10, and I moved in with my mum while she was getting cancer treatment. So for me, I was like, I'm not gonna do nonsense in school. I'm just gonna do what I can, be quiet when I can, and just try and get through school. And most of the time I was just daydreaming, but I memorized my way through school. Basically, I just memorized everything for my exams. And then I just put my opinions in the English exams. Like, I think this, I think that. And that got me through secondary school. But what I found, and I found it really interesting, Tyler, what you were saying before about like the teachers just saying like, oh, stereotyping you that, oh, you're just loud, you're just this, you're just that. But I think it's very interesting that despite me trying to kind of fade in the background, I still had my cheeky moments and stuff earlier on in my secondary school life. But the one moment I would do anything out of turn, like minor, suddenly I'm this bad up girl, I'm this, I'm that. And I remember one particular experience was, there was this person in my class in year 7, and I later found out they had like a really traumatic childhood past, but they had a lot of issues and they would behave wild, like Beyonce on the tables whilst teachers just trying to teach parlez-vous français, you know? So it was wild. I wanted to play with them because I was like, they were always alone. And basically they ended up snapping my umbrella in two. And my 2 white classmates went up to the teacher and was like, oh, so-and-so broke Salom's umbrella. I'm in isolation. How? So that experience, I was like, so I'm trying to be nice to this kid, and I end up in isolation being called you people. You people always start trouble. Meanwhile, I was that teacher's top student in our class, and we just had a lesson together where you gave me an A and I'm putting my hands up. But as soon as there's any excuse, suddenly I'm this bad girl, I'm this, I'm that. So for me, like, even if you're loud or not, I think in some schools, in some areas, with some teachers, they will find any excuse to just undermine your experience. And I think that made it so hard to kind of like speak up about any difficulties, because I was also in the top set. I just memorized everything and did the exams. And then I kind of like hit my wall at university where I was just like, rah, what's going on? I can't memorize an essay.
Oh my God, I resonate with that so much. That's so interesting. Yeah, it's that bias, isn't it? That, and being held to that different standard, that as soon as there's a chance, you're the one who's kind of really vilified.
Exactly.
And there's excuses probably made for the other child, that there's behavioral issues or something like that. So interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And I just found it very, very interesting indeed, like who was allowed to be cheeky, quote unquote, with teachers, or or have those relationships with teachers or whatever. I remember one teacher, he just hated me. I have no clue why, but he just did not like me. And I don't know, I know like a lot of teachers and a lot of my classmates thought I was weird or whatever, but yeah, he just had something in for me. So like I have like my Facebook, and I look up my Facebook memories, and in my Facebook memories it's just like me gaslighting myself, like to not like come to the conclusion that it's ADHD. I think there was even one post I made in 2009 where I was like, oh, why can't I just focus? Why can't I just do this revision? Why can't, like, oh, it must be like some disease like ADD or something. No, I'm just lazy. That was my Facebook status. And I only got diagnosed also in the pandemic because I was actually researching about autism. I was actually researching that, and I'm currently trying to get an assessment for that as well. But like when I was reading about ADHD, I was like, I can resonate with it, but it's not quite reaching fully. I'm diagnosed inattentive, and that's why I'm also seeking the autism diagnosis, because when I was reading the stuff, I just started realizing like, yeah, I can really feel all of these different traits are part of me. And also, I guess I was struggling. I like hit a proper wall. Like when I got to university, it was kind of like, oh, I can stumble across it through a couple of sambucas and tequila shots, I'll get to the end. But now it was like affecting my mental health really, really badly, and my tolerance to like things going on at work, it was just like getting worse and worse. So I said no more, basically.
And I think that tends to happen to a lot of um Black women and non-binary people, that it gets to that stage where it just becomes unsustainable. That was me as well. It got to uni, and I've heard that from so many people, either uni or the working world or becoming a mother, where it's just like there's just so much to balance that you can't keep on. Sounds like for a long time you doing like a great job at having to like mask, and you said memorizing at school. And I feel like, especially, I was really thinking about it, I guess maybe uni's like starts to be the place where a lot of us kind of don't have that structure of like a parent or a teacher. Kind of, obviously we have lecturers and stuff, but there's kind of this whole independent figuring it out for yourself, where it's just like, oh my god, there's nobody watching over me. I like this is it, I've got to try, and I can't do this anymore. Like,
yeah, because in secondary school you had like your weekly planner, this is your homework, this is what you got to study, and that's what you got to pump out. And like it's really funny now because my memory is terrible, like so bad now. Before, like I could just memorize things, but now my memory is so selective. Like I'll be walking to somewhere to do something, and I get so distracted in my thoughts that I don't even remember why I'm doing it. And people will be like, oh, I do that too sometimes. And I'm like, yeah, sometimes. I do it every working day of my life.
It affects
like
everything I do.
constantly.
Yeah,
like I don't trust myself with my phone near a bin. That's how bad it is, because I have thrown my phone in the bin. When I was trying to throw something in the recycling bin, I threw my phone instead and forgot. So like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's really also the levels between like, is it because I'm Black to like non-Black people, and also to our parents, about what you guys are talking about in terms of mental health and neurological differences. It's kind of that denial of like, no, Black people don't get that. Black people are not like this. That's a white people's disease. Da, da, da. And it compounds both from both sides. You just feel like, then who do I go to? Who do I turn to? And that's why like ADHD Babes is so good, because finally you have somewhere to turn to, whereas like, no, you're valid. What you're feeling is real.
Exactly. And that cultural understanding as well, that is often just so missed in so many places, isn't it? And that also making me think of like other stereotypes. Along with being loud, I sometimes also think about, especially like the gap in medical needs. I think especially for often Black women and non-binary people, the idea of Black women often having to be strong and having it all together, and we're nurturers and we look after everyone, which I think can be such a disservice for something like ADHD, because one, you're trying to mask because you feel like you're supposed to have all these expectations to be that person. I'm supposed to be nurturing, I'm supposed to be tidy, I'm supposed to be, you know, and I feel like I'm often not these things strong. And then I feel like that's often how medical practitioners and stuff can see you. So like you're trying to get them to see, and they're minimizing it, like, no, it's not, it can't be that. Oh, you did well in school, that was like what I feel like I went through, where it's like, oh, I don't think it's this, maybe it's just anxiety, maybe it's just like you're constantly having to fight and advocate and prove in ways it doesn't
so
often feel like
tiring.
others have to.
And I think one of the worst ones is that of all those other things, like, oh, you're resilient or whatever, I think one of the worst ones is you're so forgiving that we can just keep taking arrows to the back, and we're just supposed to be like zippity doo da zippity day, you know, like I'm okay. Like, but it's not okay. And that's why like some people just really think, like what happened to you, Tyler, when you tell people like, oh, I think I've got ADHD, they can fix their mouth to be like, and you shout, and you shout, and it's like, would you, and it's like, can you just stop and think for a second before you open your mouth? Like,
yeah, would you say that with any other health thing, like you're saying? No, but it's just so quick to minimize something like that.
I also have a question, actually, since we're kind of like talking about, you know, the fact of being Black and being stereotyped with certain statements. At some point, maybe before your diagnosis, or, you know, thinking about it being ADHD and then finding out, was there a sense of like guilt and I'm trying to think of the other word, and sort of, the word is going to come to me, this always happens. I know the word and it's literally at the tip of my tongue.
regret?
Yes. Yes, some sort of like regret that you're like, this is, you're going through this, and also feeling like, what, not necessarily why is this happening to me, but kind of feeling like, oh. And then even when you kind of feel like you want to speak to people and you say, oh yeah, I've got ADHD, there's this sense of like, oh, I don't want to tell them, because immediately they're gonna, like everyone has been saying, immediately gonna say, oh, you're using that as an excuse. And it's just like, well, no, I'm not. And so do you find yourself having to sort of like be wary of who you tell and how open you are about the fact that you know, you have ADHD?
I'll go first. I don't know, like, I mean, I'm quite an open person. I'll say there's some things I'm not that open about, but when it comes to this, like, because since I've always had the same like, oh, you lack focus, you do this, you do that. Even when I was like growing up, I'd still be like, I think I've definitely got it. I think I've definitely got this. And then it got to uni, maybe in my second year, I was just like, you know what, I'm not even going to say I think anymore, because everyone seems, well, as soon as you say I think I've got something, people are then like, how do you know, when they question it. Whereas if you go in and you're like, I have ADHD and I have anxiety, or I have X, Y, and Z, or I have dyslexia, it's like, oh right, okay. Doesn't mean any of these people are actually going to research it and see, okay, what are the actual symptoms, how does it show up for you, because there's such a wide spectrum. But at least then, if it does come up from whatever they have as a preconception, it's like, oh well, at least they're kind of aware now. But I don't know, it kind of like, say in the workplace, when I was interviewing for jobs and stuff like that, I wasn't like, oh, I've got ADHD. I didn't need anything else that I would have thought, oh, they may use that against me later on and be like, oh, sorry, there was someone better for this role. I could have do you know what I mean? Like, not that it's something that's negative against me, but it's one of those things where it's like, in that whole ableism conversation, whereby you're already Black, you're already doing this, you've already got X, Y, and Z. Do you really want to add another layer? Potentially, because you don't actually know if it is or it's not. You just have to say, okay, if I do, assume that that's how it's going to be, because you've already got all of these other things. So then it's kind of like in work, I would never ever said to anyone like, oh, I've got ADHD or whatever. But then we'd be having conversations and my boss would be like, right, I really need you to focus, just listen to what I'm saying. And we've got open plan and stuff like that. So he'd be talking and someone would start talking about biscuits and I'd be like, what? It could literally be someone starts talking about like something that they watched on TV. I'm like, oh, I saw that. And he's like, what did I just tell you? And I'm literally like, I can't remember, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He's just like, oh, right, okay, let's start again. Or like, he'd be talking and I'd just start talking to someone else kind of thing. Or he'd just like see my eyes going and he's like, right, do you need me to go over it again or whatever? Or the only way I can guarantee that I'm going to listen is if I'm making notes and writing it down. I need to be 150% in this conversation for me to ensure that I'm actually listening. And I remember one time in school, not in school, in university for my master's. So when I went into undergrad, I used to record things so I could listen to it back. Like if we were having like a tutorial or whatever, they'd be like, yeah, sure, record it. Write, notes, blah, 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 or whatever you need to do. Very accommodating, really nice. Got to master's, and then in the end of the first year, I was having like a guest tutorial thing with one of the other tutors that I've never really had before. And then I got my phone out and was like, is it all right to record and can I make notes? And he was like, no, because what are you going to do when you're in a meeting in the real world? And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, no, like, you don't need to, if you can't remember it, you can't remember it, and that's gone. You need to be on, like, you need to be in the conversation. You can't be in your book. You can't be in the recording. You're not going to have it all the time. And I was just a bit like, what? But I'm not going to be listening to you if I have to it's not going to be an engaging conversation. I'm not going to be like showing you the best of my ability if I'm not able to do that. Anyways, so we already set off on a bad foot. And then it was just went downhill from there kind of thing. But it's like, had I started the conversation with, oh, I've got ADHD, by the way, so I need to be accommodated like X, Y, and Z, probably would have been a lot more of a fruitful conversation. So it's kind of like, sometimes in education, it's definitely helpful. Sometimes in workplace, it's also helpful. But then it's like, now I've actually got my diagnosis, so I can go to like HR and be like, oh, I've got ADHD, blah, 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 I need you to make these accommodations. I'm now a bit like, oh, is that then going to make my previous like 6 years of experience, like, are they then not judge me for it, but be like, oh, so she wasn't working her full potential, or oh, she wasn't doing everything she could have done. But then it's like, I mean, I didn't know. Well, I mean, I did know, but I didn't officially know in order to say and ask for these accommodations. So it's a bit, I don't know, I guess like a little catch-22 in that.
Yeah.
If I meet people on a personal level, then yes, I'll say it out loud. If it's an educational or work thing, I'm a bit more like tentative in that. Maybe in a more off the record kind of way, I'll be like, oh yeah, I've got ADHD, ha. And officially I'm like, oh no, I'm not gonna say anything just yet because I need to see what opportunities arise kind of thing. But yeah, that's me.
It's funny you were saying about like, oh, other people thinking, have you not worked to your full potential? Because like, imagine you cook something for someone and they're like, that was delicious. And then you tell them like, oh yeah, I didn't even use as many herbs and spices as I usually use. And then they're like, nah, I'm sorry, that was disgusting. I don't like it no more. They don't do that. They wouldn't do that. So like, if they liked your work before, what business of theirs is it?
Yeah.
How much energy you use, because they don't know how much strife you went through to even get to the quality that they're enjoying so much and licking up the bowl, So
this is the thing, because it's like where I work, it's quite fluid in the teams that I've been on. So I've worked on one team for like 2 years, and then I'll switch to another team for like 6 months, and I'll go back to my original team, and then I'll go to another team. So then it's kind of like I'm constantly having to do not introductions because I know everyone, but it's completely different when you like talk to someone outside of having to work with them.
Exactly.
It's
That's
just a bit
also
like,
funny though, because like I know it goes kind of away from the stereotypes thing, but like a lot of quote unquote accommodations for like autistic people and ADHD people are actually like really good ways of working that helps cover all bases of different working styles.
yeah.
But people are so reluctant to apply them because they put on that stereotype like, no, these are accommodations and it's just for those disabled people who can't work properly. But it's actually like, no, having an agenda, recapping a meeting, being clear on the next steps for every person who has actions at the end of the meeting are actually really great ways to work effectively as a team, you know. So I just always find it funny when people come to me and are like, oh no, well, you know, we've never really done that before. And we always get the kind of stereotype for being rigid, but it's not really like that when you look at it in the bigger picture. And yeah, like I'm kind of at the stage in my life where yeah, I am just telling people, like sometimes I do feel like nervous when I tell people because you don't know how they're going to react. But at this stage, I'm like, well, do I want them in my life? That works better for like friendships, stuff, and things like that. But in work, it is proving quite difficult for me because I keep leaving jobs because I'm like, nah, this ain't the one. On to the next one. So,
but I couldn't like agree with so much of what you said more. And I think especially like routine and habits then I think that's why it is kind of good when you like, whether you get official diagnosis or you just like are aware of your own ADHD, I think it just does make you kinder to yourself and just say like, you know what, this is what works for me and this is what doesn't, and this is how I'm going to try and do things. And I think you're so right about the working world, and that's why, like, funny enough, I suspect that somebody I manage has ADHD. Now obviously I'm really careful about it. It's not for me to like say that I think it, but we've had general conversations and she's like, oh, you talking about it makes me think I have it. But obviously she doesn't have all these like official kind of accommodations and support in work. But that's why I'm always just keen for us to talk through things and say, okay, what works for you, what can we put in place? And I think there just needs to be more of that in the workplace. That, like you said, I think neurodiverse people tend to be better at doing, like you said, things like having agendas before a meeting and just like people being aware. Like I do think it's crazy that I'm often going into meetings and I have no idea what this meeting's about, why I'm taking an hour of my time, like just action points after meetings, like summarizing something that you've asked somebody to do in an email quickly. Like these things are just better in, I think, the working world in general. And I think you're right in that sense. And Jules, what you were saying, just thinking about like getting my official diagnosis only, I think, September last year, it is such like a weird feeling because I guess for the last 3 or 4 years I've been saying I have like ADHD. I've told myself, I've done all the research, yeah, I have ADHD. And then getting that official diagnosis, I do feel like it was kind of, it sounds so dramatic, but somewhat like of a bereavement, because you do go through all these like weird feelings. So you do kind of go through like you were saying, literally all like anger at how long things have taken. You start thinking what could have been. Oh, if this had happened earlier, I would have. And then so getting it at 30 years old, I feel like 30 is already such often like a pivotal point going into your 30s. I just started thinking about, oh, this is why I've taken so long to do this, or this is why this hasn't happened. And we already just always caught up in such unnecessary like age milestones. It just made me think of all this stuff. And then I feel like now I'm starting to get a lot more to like the acceptance and like being proud and speaking to people about it. Because yeah, for a long time, even though I did think I had it, I wouldn't really, other than to close friends. I didn't disclose it to family. There was a bit of a sense of shame to disclose it in work, because similarly to like what a lot of you have said, I work in the civil service that already isn't as diverse as it needs to be. So you already feel like, you know, you're a Black woman who's trying to progress in spaces and people already think that you've gone to spaces because of certain quotas and stuff. So it's like, I don't want to add this badge of, oh, she's got ADHD as well. So there was always a lot of that fear. But I feel like now I am starting to be like, you know what, there is positive. Some of the ways I do things is because of my ADHD in a good way. So I am going to let people know. And maybe some of these ways of working can like be shared. So yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's often such a process just figuring it out, and it does change day by day. But I think it often does just help you be kinder to yourself once you know it, that you
Yeah,
have it.
I'm sort of still working on that. Because they'll, like you said, it fluctuates from
Yeah,
day to
day to
day.
day.
Some days I'm just like, you did good today. You remembered something, you know? And then there's some days where I'm just like, oh, I get frustrated at myself because of the fact that, you know, I hadn't done something, or someone's like, oh, Juliana, you're supposed to be, or Jules, you're supposed to be in this meeting. You didn't come. And I'm like, crap. Oh no. And there's this sense of guilt. And then even trying to explain to them the reason behind it, you feel like they're looking at you sideways, like, yeah, whatever. And it's just like, well, no, it isn't whatever. This is how I'm feeling. And this is the reason why. And it's so interesting going back into the discussion around work and being able to tell work. So I work in like TV production, sort of like all of those different spaces. And naturally you think that, you know, being in a part of that world is a lot more kind of like lenient and creative and stuff like that. But I work in more the admin side, and being someone who works in admin and has ADHD and has to manage people's calendars, people will look at me like, but how Sway? And I'm like, I don't know how either, but we're here. And it pays my bills. So, you know, so even kind of like, I remember my last job, I disclosed from the very beginning, I have ADHD, and I was greeted with sort of like a, oh, but why didn't you tell me this in the interview process?
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, yeah, exactly. And I was just like, So immediately I was sort of hesitant about kind of sharing my sort of like adjustments needed and stuff like that. And I was just like, do you know what, Juliana, since you've already been able to work and have made a routine for yourself before your diagnosis, you know, it doesn't seem like they are, you know, at a space of being able to kind of know that, you know, people have got various disabilities and stuff like that, and you know, it's about accommodating for them. So I just immediately kind of just said, oh, but I'm fine, to kind of like relieve a sense of like them feeling kind of like, oh, is she able to do her job, you know?
Is this not, sorry, is
Yeah,
this not
go on.
also kind of like linking back to this whole perceived idea of like Black women being difficult? You don't want to seem like you're being
That's
difficult.
what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Because I've even been told from a few different people, like, oh, people think you're really difficult to work with, or, and then I've heard from other people like, oh, you're really lovely to work with. But then it's those people that are like, oh, you're really difficult, that makes me stick in, like, are you telling me that because I've asked for something, not even to do with ADHD, but it's like if someone says something, I don't understand it. I'm like, I don't understand.
Or you
And
just
be
don't
blunt.
agree.
Am I just being, they think I'm just being a
The
Black
angry
woman
Black
that's
woman,
just
yeah,
like, I don't
who's
understand, so
demanding
do you
what
want to
she
tell
wants.
me? Do you want to explain it to me in a better way? Sorry for my tone. I didn't even hear my tone because, again, another symptom. But for you, as a white man or a white female, perceiving me, you just think I'm giving you attitude because that's just who I am. Or that's just part of the stereotype that I have. But actually, I don't know what my tone I'm using, because a lot of the time it just happens and comes out. And then if I don't understand something, it's not the fact that I'm even telling you that I don't understand is something that should be applauded, rather than just being sat there and just not doing anything because I don't understand. And then on top of that, it's like, why is it that me telling you that I don't understand is now an issue? That makes me difficult.
That's such a huge thing that I've experienced throughout my work life, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because I wanted to ask, like, in workplaces, have you felt like people think you're combative or contrarian just for not going with the flow of what other people in the workplace are doing? I just felt like a lot of the time I just felt like, am I saying something in a weird way, or have I done something wrong to basically make people react that way to me?
And it's always back to that different standard. I've definitely experienced that at work, and I feel like you said, I think you said it earlier on, Selim, that there is an element of expecting sometimes Black women to be so forgiving and take so much on,
Yes.
whilst I work in spaces often predominantly with white men, and I feel like sometimes over the smallest thing they are not afraid to speak up. I work with colleagues who are so ranty and moany over the smallest thing. It's like, you could live a day in my shoes. You moan about everything in the workplace and everyone just lets you have it. But it's like, if we speak up about something, then you do feel like you're having to deal with that, like those microaggressions, those covert like wording of phrasing things. Oh, your tone, Abigail, well, that was a bit abrupt. And I'm thinking, are you serious? This colleague is like swearing and moaning about the smallest of things, this white colleague, and nobody like seems to care. I think there is often an expectation of how we should be, maybe a sense of just being grateful in spaces, and we just should kind of, you know, blend in the background and just do what's asked. And if we do speak up for ourselves, then that's combative. And I think that also feeds into sometimes why it's so hard for us to get like our needs in the healthcare system, because I think it's sometimes that same thing when dealing with medical people, that it's like, oh, okay, no, just know your place. You don't know your needs. I know your needs. I know what you should be doing. You just kind of be quiet. So it's just, yeah, I think it's really interesting how it affects us often with race and gender in so many spaces.
And it links back to that whole loudness thing, because I'm sure we've all had in our office that one loud white person. It's like, you're right. That loud person who everyone
Absolutely.
knows. That, you're right, Laura. Yeah, what you do on the weekend?
That's just Julie. That's just how Julie is.
Lovely. God forbid 1, 2 Black people, a gang, talk together for more than 5 minutes. Oh, Salam, can you? Yeah, so some people have been complaining, you know, about it's a bit loud, and you're talking about the fufu and the plantain. You need to stop. Oh, but Julie over there, you're like love every day, every week. I can't fathom it. And I think like with the whole, like, especially I guess for like hyperactive ADHDers, like having to contain yourself and like mask yourself in the office when really maybe they're like really fidgety or like to get up a lot or really like to chat, get it out in the morning and then do their job or whatever. Like if you're constantly being like, oh, you're being a bit too loud, you're distracting people, it's kind of like it will really wears you down. Like I'm the type of person who prefers to sit in a corner with my headset on and not be talked to, because if you do talk to me, don't know when I'm going to stop.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
and that's when you get
so
deep on the other
similar.
extreme, isn't it, of being antisocial? Because I've had that before,
yeah,
where it's like, I'm literally just trying to concentrate. I have to finish this document by a certain deadline. I'm not trying to be like, oh, but if you like collaborate and speak more with people, it's like, no, that literally I won't be able to. So I just need to
literally no. But this is the thing, because it's like I'm obviously very similar. So it's like I'll be in the office, it's open plan, someone will tell a joke in my team, everyone will laugh, but my laugh is the loudest, obviously. And then there'll be people from the other end of the office that like look over the top of the computer and they're like, all right, okay. Then it gets to lunchtime and everyone's like, oh, what were you laughing at this morning? You were very loud. Then if I've got my headphones on and I'm trying to do work, it's like, go down to lunch. It's like, oh, we've not heard you laugh today. So what have you been doing? And it's like,
they want you to minstrel, but not minstrel too hard.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, I can't win.
You can't win. Once I had like a chronic pain flare up and I was out. I just wanted to get in, do my work and get out because I could barely concentrate. Tell me why my manager calls me whilst walking her dog, telling me that some people in the office have been saying that I'm bringing the mood down in the office, minding my own business. I just said to her, also open plan, if people don't want to know how I am, don't ask. Like I was annoyed. I was just like, wow, I can barely keep my eyes open and you are prefacing this by you're walking in a field with your dog to come and tell me this. I just let her have it because I was just like, are you serious? Are you actually serious? But
it's mad though. Yeah. Because also then if you're in work and someone then perceives you as doing like bringing the mood down or
you're not a team player,
being aggressive or doing whatever, it's like, bro, if I actually did what you say I'm doing, you would not even, I would no longer work here. Like, it would be a completely different story. Like, if you want me to pop off, you'll understand that I'm popping off. This is just me. I'm okay. I'm cool. But clearly it's too much for you. So I then have to mask even further. And then you then end up masking too much, and that's also a problem. So it's like, well, what am I supposed to do now?
And Tyler, I
Already?
don't know if you have emotional regulation
Oh yeah,
issues, because I
100%.
certainly do. And it really tests kind of like, because we're holding that all in. And that's why, well, I don't know about you, but I'm always tired. Like I wouldn't even call it tired. I have fatigue because it never ends. And it's because I'm always holding in every single thing, to not be too much, to not be too little, whatever, to the point that my brain is just like, enough.
It's draining. Like, it's literally draining. Like, as soon as like I got furloughed in the first part of the pandemic, I was literally like, suddenly I was like, oh my God, I am so tired. And I'm the sort of person, like, I'll go to work, and then after work I'm going out somewhere, I've got skiing lessons, I've got netball, I've got this, I've got that, I'm doing ceramics. Every single day of the week, everyone's like, oh, how did you do it all? You must be so tired. I'm like, no, I'm fine. Because I'm just constantly go, 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 go. So then it's like, actually stop. And then it's like, oh, I don't need to do work anymore for however long. And then it's like, you then just sit and think, in the time when you would be working, like, oh, I was masking hard. Like, that just act of not having to do that on a daily basis is then you understand how drained you actually are, because you're not having to do it all the time.
Yeah, that links to sort of what I wanted to ask in terms of like solutions. So do you think that's what it is? It is just about declaring, letting kind of people know our needs. What do you think? How can we change kind of people's ways of thinking? What can we do? Is it just about declaring, finding that community? What do you think?
For me, because at the back of my head, I'm also kind of thinking about our family and parents' expectations of us in the workplace as well. I think like if you have a supportive family who isn't being quite funny with your diagnosis and stuff, like having your family and your friendship networks and networks like ADHD Babes as well is really helpful to kind of regain self-esteem that might have been like tarnished your whole life, basically, to kind of gain that courage to ask. I don't think declaring in every situation is the way, because unfortunately the discrimination does happen. I mean, it really depends on what kind of person you are. Are you the kind of person who's like, I will just do this job, I don't care if they're being funny, I'll do the job and go? Or if you're like, no, I want to stay here for some time. For me, I think it's just about safeguarding yourself. So like really having that email paper trail. I don't really declare before, like during an interview. Sometimes I might, sometimes I won't, depending on how I feel about how the interview is going. But I've started declaring after the interview now, because yeah, I need it, because I've really hit that wall where if people don't want to like apply more flexible ways of working, I'm just going to get it through declaring it like, this is actually what I need to work. If you don't want to do agendas because you don't think agendas are a good way to work, I'm going to get it through through it being my accommodation if it has to be, which is a shame to get to that point. But I think in my future permanent jobs, I will declare in the kind of route to get access to work and stuff like that. But I hope I don't derail it too much, but I'm just so curious about this question about like, because you mentioned it before about the whole age thing. I don't have a concept of time. So me turning 30, I could be turning 20, but like the parents being like, oh, you're 27 now and you don't have mortgage and blah, 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 and stuff like that. Like, have you kind of felt any pressure, like Tyler, especially like from your family with the ADHD as well, to kind of be like, I need to achieve more than I'm actually achieving?
Yeah, I can jump in and answer that. It's so interesting because I feel like I get pressure every single sort of day, but I think once I hit 30, because I'm 33 now, once I hit 30, I literally, the words just go over my head. So if my mum is saying, Juliana, you haven't done this, you haven't done that, I'm like, my life is a journey and it's my own journey. I don't care whether my cousin has had 4 kids or all my friends are married or my friends just bought this house. My journey is my journey, and this is how I want to do it. This is what I'm experiencing.
Amen.
So for me, I've just gotten to a stage in my life where I'm just like, I'm not listening to these pressures. I'm not listening to the fact that, you know, at 30, I was supposed to have a house and a mortgage. You know, I'm supposed to be a CEO. I'm supposed to do this and I'm supposed to do that. When I feel like society has its stacks against me. So do you know what? I'm not going to put that pressure on myself to then come and kill myself early for what? For a
Exactly.
mortgage that I have to pay for 25 years. And then even after that, if I'm leaving it for my kids will then have to pay inheritance tax for the government. Anyway, let me not run into going to a
We've
rant.
got Jules going on this
because it's those sort of pressures that, like, no, I just want happiness. I just want to be able to just, you know, deal with what I need to deal with rather than feel like I'm having all these pressures and then assigning myself and putting myself and doing all of these things for the benefit of others and not for myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
And
I don't know.
that's the mule stereotype. We're just muling for everybody else, like putting everybody else's burdens and wants on our back.
Yeah, I got to an age where I was just like, nah. It's a no. I literally, every time my mom is like, have you considered? I'm like, no. I literally tell her no, point blank period, because it's just kind of like, first thing is first, I'm an adult. Second of all, I don't have to listen to you anymore. Like, obviously, respectfully, like, you know, you are my mother, but I don't have to, the way you felt like you had to dictate or, you know, have control of my life as a child because I needed those rules and regulations. I no longer need those things. And to be honest with you, as much as you feel like you know your child, sometimes you just don't. Because parents, my mum is so adamant that I know you more than you know yourself. I'm like, girl, no, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't have a clue.
Yeah. That's so true. That's so interesting, actually, because I told my mom about my like ADHD diagnosis afterwards, and like I talked to her about a bit about the process, and she's like, "Oh, so who did you get?" Because I told her you have to get someone to kind of, you know, fill in that kind of how you were as a child leading to adulthood thing. She's like, "Why would you not get me to do it? I know you better than anyone." And I'm like, and my boyfriend did it in the end, and I was like, "Yeah, there are things you know, but." Because of masking and because of how probably you perceive certain things, I don't think unintentionally you wouldn't have given it justice, because you'd be like, oh, she did well in school. There was no issues here. There was no, maybe it was just that, but that, like, there's always these things, and I feel like with that intersection of like race and gender, and then often coming from immigrant families, I feel like it's like you want us to do all, which can add to the pressures. It's like you want us to do well in school. You don't want us to talk to boys up until a certain age. But then suddenly you want lots of us, if you are in heterosexual relationships, to get like married and have all these kids. It's like, what? How are we supposed to do all this stuff? Like, it's just, there's so much expectations you often place on us, and it's just like, and back to like, you know, being domesticated, nurture, it's just, it can be so like demanding. I think it often puts so much pressure on like Black women. It's just too much. So yeah, I like agree with you more, especially as I've got older and like now in like 31 and in my 30s, I've just had to, I mean, there are still days sometimes where I do feel that pressure, because you can be doing all these successful things, but it can be like, oh, when will you get married? You've been together for a long time. When will you have your friends having a chat? And then you do start feeling that, but then I'm just like, why am I letting that external, I do eventually want to get married, but not right now. Why am I letting that external timeline and other people's deadlines like ruin that for me? That's internally not what I want right now. So yeah. Thank you so much, Tyler and Selon, for joining us. This has like been a really good conversation. I've loved it. Can you tell us where we can like, where the audience can hear from you, any of your social medias or anything you want to provide for everyone?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram for a short period of time. I deactivate and activate it a lot. It's Tyler Antonia, TYLERANTONIA. All my handles are exactly the same. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, and you can find me on Instagram. My public one is called Selom with an R. So that's Sierra Echo Lima Oscar Mike with an R. Yeah, and I don't really post any original content myself, but if you want to have a look at my travel photos, I love to travel, so you can look at that.
I love that. Don't forget, you can reach out to us with a message for our Dear Babes advice episodes. You can send us a voice note or a written message by clicking on the links on the show notes.
And if you would like to join ADHD Babes or learn more, you'll find the links to our website and social page in the show notes. And you can also visit adhdbabes.com.
Thank you for listening. And if you like today's episode, please feel free to follow so you don't miss future episodes. We're so pleased if you can leave us a rating and a review and let everyone know your thoughts.
Catch you all next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of ADHD Babes, the podcast. If you're a Black woman or non-binary person and needs help and support in managing your ADHD or advice on diagnosis, please visit adhdbabes.com. No clinical diagnosis is required to join. Join us in 2 weeks for a new episode. Until then, all the love from the ADHD Babes team.